This is my true story. I was an old man who gave my life to one woman. I thought she was my partner, my loyal wife. I never thought betrayal would come from inside my own home. But the truth is, the woman I trusted the most was not faithful to me. She betrayed me with the very man I paid to serve us, our driver. That day, my heart broke. But I did not fight with anger. I fought with truth. And what I did next shocked her whole family. Before I tell you, please like this story, share it, and subscribe so others can hear my words. I had spent my life working hard, believing that a simple, honest life would bring peace and happiness. I never wanted extravagance or luxury. My goal was to provide comfort for my wife and create a home where love and trust could grow. Every day, I woke early, worked long hours, and came home exhausted, yet I never complained. I believed that the years of sacrifice, the sleepless nights, the small acts of kindness, preparing her favorite meals, keeping the house neat, making sure everything ran smoothly, would be enough to earn her gratitude and loyalty. I thought our life was built on honesty and respect. When we hired a driver, it was to help her, to make life easier, to free up time for her to rest and enjoy herself. I never imagined that the man we welcomed into our home, someone who saw our private life every day, would become the very person who betrayed us. I trusted him without question. I trusted him to be loyal, to follow the rules of our house, and to respect the boundaries of a family that had given him work and a place in our lives. I never thought the man who drove us, helped with errands, and carried messages would use my trust to destroy the life I had built. Every day, I watched my wife with pride. I believed she appreciated the comfort, the ease, and the security I had created. I believed she valued the years we had spent together. But slowly, I began to notice small signs, little habits that seemed innocent at first, but grew into warnings. She would smile too brightly when the driver was around, laugh at jokes that I had never seen her laugh at before, and find excuses to spend time with him, even when it was unnecessary. At first, I pushed the thoughts aside. I told myself I was imagining things. Maybe she was just friendly. Maybe he was just funny. Maybe I was old and insecure. But deep inside, my gut was screaming. I felt a cold weight in my chest every time I saw them together. I felt the warmth of our home turn into suspicion and fear. I began to notice that her words to me had changed subtly. The kindness in her tone was replaced with something forced, distant, like a performance. She spoke to me politely, but her eyes betrayed another story. Every glance toward the driver carried a secret I could not ignore. I could not tell anyone because this was my private life, and exposing suspicions without proof would make me look foolish. As weeks passed, I started watching quietly. I observed patterns, learned when they would meet in secret, and noticed the messages she hid from me. My life, which had been simple and honest, had turned into a careful calculation of observation and restraint. I could not allow my anger to show because I had no proof yet. I could not confront them because without proof, I would be laughed at, blamed, or dismissed. Instead, I focused on gathering evidence, recording details of their betrayal. Every step I took was deliberate, measured, and silent. I began to understand the cruel reality of betrayal. It does not always come from strangers. Often, it comes from the people closest to you, the ones you trust the most. It comes silently, slowly, and with cunning. I felt heartbreak, anger, and shame all at once, but I also felt a growing clarity. I realized that my strength would not come from shouting, from blaming, or from fighting in anger. My strength would come from proof, from patience, and from exposing the truth in a way that could not be denied. My simple life had been shattered by deceit, but I refused to let myself be crushed. I began planning quietly, carefully, without letting anyone suspect what I was thinking. I knew the betrayal had to be exposed, and I knew the exposure had to be undeniable. Every message, every hidden conversation, every sign of their deceit would become part of the proof. My purpose became clear: to show her family the truth and let her face the consequences of her actions. At first, I tried to ignore it. I told myself it was nothing, just a trick of my imagination. An old man overthinking what should be simple. But the unease kept growing. I began noticing things that did not make sense. Her laughter seemed brighter, warmer, more alive whenever the driver was around. She would linger on his words longer than necessary, tilt her head in a way I had never seen her do for me, and smile at him with a secret that I was not part of. Each time I watched, a pit formed in my stomach, deep and painful, but I refused to acknowledge it fully. She began finding excuses to spend time with him, little errands that seemed harmless, but always allowed her to meet him alone. Sometimes it was, "I need help with the car." Sometimes it was, "Could you run this to the store for me?" Each excuse, each small task, was a moment where I could feel the growing distance between us, though I could not yet explain why. I tried to trust her, as I always had. I told myself it was nothing, that she loved me and would never betray me. But my instincts were growing sharper. My heart told me something was terribly wrong, even when my mind tried to protect me from seeing it. I started noticing subtle changes in her behavior. She would check her phone secretly, hide messages, step outside for calls that lasted far too long. Her tone changed when she spoke to me, polite but distant, like a mask. Even her laughter, once shared warmly with me, was now carefully measured, reserved for him. My own presence seemed less important in her world. Every day it became clearer that something had shifted, but I still hoped I was wrong. I wanted to believe that my life, built on years of loyalty, work, and love, had not been betrayed. The driver, too, began to act differently around the house. His presence, once unnoticed beyond his duties, started to feel intrusive. He lingered when he should have left, smiled at her in ways that made me uneasy, and became more familiar than any employee should be. I felt the walls of our home, which I had worked so hard to keep safe and peaceful, begin to close in on me. I realized that the betrayal was not in rumors, not in imagination, but in the small, quiet ways that they connected when I was not looking. Even the simplest moments became painful. Watching them interact, hearing her laughter from another room, seeing his hand brush against hers. Each moment was a stab to my chest. I tried to carry on as if nothing was wrong, but inside, my mind was racing. I could not confront her yet, not without proof. I could not trust the anger that boiled inside me to act without reason. I knew that if I made a mistake, if I accused her without evidence, I would be the one mocked and disbelieved. So, I waited, quietly, observing, noting every interaction, every hidden smile, every secret glance. My unease became a purpose. What began as a painful suspicion turned into a careful strategy. I would gather proof, silently, without letting her know that I understood the betrayal. I would record messages, save photos, and keep notes of every meeting and conversation I could find. I knew that if I acted too soon, I would lose my chance. But if I waited and collected the evidence, I would have control. I would have the power to show the truth in a way that could not be denied, in a way that would make the betrayal visible to everyone. By the time I was ready to act, the unease had transformed into focus. The fear and uncertainty that haunted me for weeks had become determination. I no longer felt powerless. I knew the truth. I knew the evidence existed, and I knew exactly how I would use it. The betrayal that had caused sleepless nights, the laughter that had turned into knives, the subtle glances, all of it would be revealed in a single moment. And when that time came, I would no longer be a victim. I would be the one who controlled the story. The day I discovered the truth, my world shifted in an instant. I had returned home earlier than usual, finishing errands sooner than expected. At first, everything seemed normal. The house was quiet, calm, and undisturbed. But then, I saw them together. My wife sat close to the driver, leaning in as if there were no walls between them. They laughed softly, whispered words I could not hear at first, and their gestures were intimate, familiar, in a way that made my heart pound with dread. The image burned into my mind instantly, and I froze, unsure whether to step inside or run. I felt the weight of betrayal like a heavy stone pressing against my chest. Each laugh, each touch, each glance confirmed what my instincts had warned me. My life, built on years of trust, love, and patience, had been invaded. The driver, a man I had employed and trusted to serve faithfully, was no longer just an employee. He had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. And my wife, the woman I had loved and devoted my life to, was standing beside him, complicit in every secret. The realization made the air feel thick, impossible to breathe. Later, I searched her phone. Every hidden message, every secret call, every late-night text revealed the depth of their betrayal. I read words of passion, of laughter shared at my expense, of plans made while I was oblivious. I discovered pictures that captured moments I never imagined could exist, photos they thought no one would ever see. Every word, every image, every recorded moment was a testament to the deception I had unknowingly endured. Pain and anger twisted together inside me, making my body tremble, yet my mind remained oddly calm. I remembered the small things I had overlooked before, the way she lingered when he was around, the excuses she gave to see him, the subtle tone of her voice that changed when he spoke. Each tiny detail, once dismissed as harmless, now screamed betrayal. I felt the sting of humiliation, the quiet horror that the person I loved most in life had chosen him over me. And worse, it was not just the love lost, but the trust shattered, the years of companionship destroyed by secret whispers and hidden smiles. But amidst the shock, I began to see clarity. I understood that confronting them in the heat of the moment would achieve nothing. If I yelled, if I accused, they would deny everything. They would twist words, shift blame, and make me appear irrational. My fury, unchecked, could be used against me, leaving me powerless. No, I had to act differently. I realized that the only way to truly make them accountable was through evidence, through undeniable proof that could not be contested, through a revelation that could strip away their pride completely. So I began gathering the proof. Screenshots, photos, recordings. I kept them carefully, organizing them like a dossier. Every late-night call, every hidden message, every shared image became a weapon in my hands. Pain transformed into purpose. Heartbreak became focus. I knew the moment I had been waiting for would require patience, calm, and precision. The more I compiled, the more I understood the magnitude of the betrayal, but also the power I now held to expose it. By the end of that day, I had seen it all, and the bitter truth had settled like ash in my chest. I was no longer just hurt. I was resolute. They had believed their secret was safe, that their actions would go unnoticed. But now I held the proof, and with it, the ability to reveal the truth to the people who mattered most. My anger had turned into strategy. My sorrow had become a weapon. And in that transformation, I found a strange peace, a sense that justice, in its own quiet way, was about to be served. After discovering the betrayal, my nights became the heaviest part of the day. The sun would set, and the house, once filled with warmth and laughter, felt like a prison. I lay in bed pretending to sleep, but my mind raced. Every memory of my wife, every shared moment with her, was now tainted. The little things I had once cherished, the way she smiled at me, the gentle touch of her hand, the quiet evenings we shared, suddenly seemed like lies I had believed. My heart ached not just from the loss of love, but from the knowledge that every smile and word had been a mask, hiding a secret that cut deeper than any wound. I replayed the moments I had once trusted blindly. I remembered how she had insisted on privacy when talking to the driver, how she often left the room to make phone calls, and how she always seemed busy when I asked simple questions. All of it clicked now, forming a pattern of deceit I could no longer ignore. Every gesture, every word, every glance I had overlooked was now evidence of the betrayal that had taken root in my home. The silence of the night amplified the sting, echoing through my chest like a constant reminder of what had been done behind my back. But amid the grief and anger, I began to understand something crucial. My reaction in those first moments, shouting, confronting, or even blaming, would not serve justice. It would only allow them to manipulate the narrative, turning my pain into their defense. If I raised my voice, they would deny, they would twist, and they would try to make me the villain in the story. The truth, I realized, was my only weapon. The silence of the night gave me the clarity to see that anger alone would not fix what had been broken. I needed strategy, patience, and proof. So I began to plan in quiet determination. Each night, I organized the evidence I had collected. I reviewed every message, every call, and every photo, making sure nothing could be questioned or dismissed. I documented every detail meticulously, like a careful craftsman building a structure that could not be toppled. I wrote down dates, times, and contexts, connecting each piece of evidence so that the entire story of their betrayal would become undeniable. What had been my personal pain now transformed into a calculated preparation for exposure. During these nights, I also confronted my own emotions. I acknowledged the heartbreak, the rage, and the humiliation, but I did not let them control me. Instead, I channeled these feelings into focus. The more I immersed myself in the truth, the stronger I felt. I realized that they had underestimated me, believing I was weak, that I would remain silent, or that I would collapse under the weight of betrayal. But in these quiet hours, I built my strength. My sorrow became fuel, my anger became precision, and my heartbreak became a weapon of calculated justice. Sleep became an occasional visitor, arriving only when exhaustion overtook my restless mind. Each morning, I woke with renewed resolve. The betrayal no longer made me helpless. It made me vigilant. Every interaction, every glance at my wife or the driver, reminded me of the silent power I now held. They thought their secret was safe, hidden behind smiles and daily routines. But I was patient, and patience was my ally. I knew that one careful public moment would reveal everything, and the impact would be absolute. In the silence of these nights, I learned that revenge does not need shouting, and justice does not require confrontation. Quiet preparation, careful strategy, and undeniable proof would do what anger never could. The hours of solitude became my training ground. I became the observer, the planner, the one who held the final card in a game they did not even realize they were playing. And in that quiet, I finally understood. The truth, when revealed at the perfect moment, would strike harder than any words ever could. When the nights of silent reflection shaped my resolve, I realized that acting hastily would ruin everything. Confronting my wife or the driver in private, no matter how angry I felt, would allow them to weave lies, deny every accusation, and portray me as unstable or jealous. I understood their kind well. They survived by twisting facts, hiding behind charm, and manipulating perceptions. If I let them speak first, the truth could be buried, distorted, or dismissed. I could not give them that chance. I needed a plan so precise that no denial could undo it, a strategy so strong that the consequences would be irreversible. The truth had to hit hard, in a place where no lies could hide. I started by considering who would feel the betrayal most and who could validate its weight. It became clear that her family deserved to see the reality she had concealed. They had praised her as loyal, devoted, and trustworthy, never imagining she carried such a secret. They were blind to the deceit, and that blind faith had to be shattered, not for cruelty, but for truth. Exposing her before her family would strip her false pride, reveal the reality of her choices, and let everyone she loved understand what she had done. It would be more effective than private confrontations, arguments, or shouting ever could. With the target decided, I turned my attention to the evidence. I had already collected screenshots, call logs, and photographs, but I needed to organize them into an undeniable narrative. Every message between her and the driver had to be laid out in order, every word highlighted for clarity, every photo contextualized. Nothing could be missing, nothing could be misunderstood. I labeled dates, times, and the location of each interaction. I compiled it all into a sequence that clearly exposed the betrayal, leaving no room for doubt. It was painstaking work, but necessary. Each detail added weight, each record reinforced the truth. While preparing, I reminded myself to control my emotions. Anger and bitterness could cloud judgment, and I could not allow them to interfere. Every time my hands shook or my heart pounded, I forced myself to focus on the ultimate goal: public exposure through undeniable proof. My sorrow and rage transformed into discipline. I visualized the moment when I would reveal everything, and that vision guided every step of my preparation. I wanted the revelation to be precise, clean, and devastating, leaving no chance for denial or deflection. Once the evidence was fully organized, I prepared the materials for delivery. I printed every screenshot, every call log, every photograph. I avoided commentary or insults. The evidence needed no embellishment. The truth alone would be sufficient. I placed everything in a plain envelope, sealed it carefully, and reviewed it multiple times to ensure nothing was missing. Every item was a weapon of precision, not anger. The envelope represented the culmination of my silent nights, my careful observation, and my unwavering patience. Finally, I decided on the timing. Her family dinner, an event she believed would celebrate togetherness and her perfect image, would be the stage. The place and time had to be right to maximize impact. The public setting would ensure that her actions could not be hidden, her lies could not be defended, and the consequences could not be avoided. The anticipation was heavy, but I embraced it. Every day leading up to the dinner, I rehearsed mentally, imagining her reaction, the gasps, the disbelief, and the weight of exposure falling exactly where it mattered. I realized that this plan required patience and control more than fury. If executed correctly, it would reveal her duplicity fully and powerfully. I had become a man transformed by betrayal, my silence now more potent than any outburst could ever be. The strategy was complete. Gather the evidence, choose the perfect moment, expose the truth publicly, and let her face the consequences of her actions without me ever needing to raise my voice. The calculated plan gave me calm. The heartbreak remained, but the power shifted. I no longer felt helpless. I held control. The night before the family dinner, I reviewed every piece of evidence one final time, feeling the weight of truth in my hands. I knew that when the moment came, everything would change, and justice would finally be served, not through anger, not through confrontation, but through silence and undeniable proof. The day of the family dinner arrived with a calm that felt almost unreal. The house buzzed with chatter, laughter, and the pleasant clinking of dishes as relatives gathered around, unaware of the storm that quietly approached. Everyone assumed the evening would be just another celebration of family, another night of smiles and stories, another occasion to praise my wife for her loyalty and grace. They had no idea that everything they believed about her was about to collapse. As I stepped inside, I felt the weight of my purpose settle over me, heavy but steady. This was the moment I had been preparing for, the stage where truth would reign supreme. I observed the room carefully, taking note of every smile, every gesture, every assumption. My wife moved about with her usual charm, laughing lightly at stories, sipping drinks, exchanging polite words with cousins and aunts. Her demeanor suggested innocence, a perfect wife in the eyes of her family. The driver, unaware of the role he had played in this drama, lingered in the background, performing his usual duties. Both of them were blind to the storm that had been quietly gathering, blind to the envelope in my coat pocket that contained the undeniable proof of their betrayal. Every laugh, every glance, every movement of theirs made my resolve stronger. I felt a strange calm as I sat at the table, studying them silently. My mind replayed the nights I had spent gathering evidence, the careful organization of every text, call, and photograph. Each piece of proof was meticulously prepared to demonstrate their duplicity clearly and irrefutably. I recalled the first moment I realized what they had been doing, the shock, the heartbreak, and the slow burning determination that had replaced my despair. Every memory sharpened my focus. Tonight, the truth would walk into the room with me. The younger relatives played games, telling jokes and teasing one another. The older ones shared stories, unaware of the silent tension growing in the air. My wife's family believed they were in a safe, comfortable environment where loyalty and love were unbroken. That belief would be shattered in minutes. I watched her expressions, noting every small gesture that betrayed her confidence. Even as she smiled, I could see the subtle arrogance of someone who thought her secret was perfectly hidden. That arrogance would crumble soon. As the main course was served, I felt the perfect moment approaching. The laughter reached its peak, voices rising in joyous chatter. This was the exact moment when attention was high, when all eyes would be on me if I chose to rise, when the impact of truth would be most devastating. I could see her glance at the driver, a subtle acknowledgement of their secret, completely unaware that the envelope in my coat pocket carried the revelation that would destroy them. I reminded myself to remain calm, measured, and controlled. Every emotion I contained would enhance the weight of what was about to be revealed. I reflected on the irony of the situation. The people they sought to impress, the family they wanted to seem perfect to, were about to witness the reality of their actions. Every joke my wife told, every polite conversation, every gentle smile, none of it would protect her now. Every illusion she had maintained about her character, every lie she had practiced for years, would crumble when the proof hit the table. And I, silent, patient, and prepared, would be the man who revealed it all. Finally, I felt the surge of control settle fully within me. I had waited, prepared, and calculated every step. The dinner was the stage, the family was the audience, and the envelope of truth was the weapon. I knew the next moments would alter everything, not through shouting or confrontation, but through the undeniable power of evidence. The calm before the storm was thick, and I embraced it fully. The family would see the truth, and she would face the consequences of her choices in front of everyone she valued most. The moment I had been waiting for arrived quietly, but with immense weight. As the laughter and chatter filled the room, I stood slowly, deliberately, feeling every eye begin to turn in my direction. The sudden movement cut through the noise like a blade, bringing a subtle hush over the table. I could see the shift in attention, the momentary confusion, the curiosity in the faces around me. All of them believed this was a harmless, ordinary family dinner, but in a few heartbeats, that illusion would shatter completely. I held the envelope tightly, my fingers wrapped around the truth that had been silently growing in power for weeks. As I moved to the center of the room, the atmosphere changed. Conversations faltered, glasses paused midway to lips, and the once joyful room felt the first stirrings of shock. I opened the envelope carefully, letting the crisp, printed pages slide out, each one containing the undeniable evidence of betrayal. My wife's eyes widened slightly, her perfect mask faltering. The driver's hands trembled slightly, and his composure cracked even before I spoke. They had never imagined the consequences of their actions would arrive in such a calm, deliberate manner in front of the very people they sought to impress and deceive. I began to read aloud, slowly and clearly, each word of their messages. Each message was a dagger, cutting through the facade they had so carefully constructed. I read their words of affection, their laughter at my expense, the casual cruelty disguised as private love. Every phrase was proof, undeniable and exposed. As I spoke, I saw jaws drop, eyes widen, and fingers clutch plates nervously. The room went silent, the sound of disbelief replacing the earlier noise. Her father's face turned crimson, the shame and anger mingling into a visible storm. Her mother's hands trembled, her eyes refusing to meet mine, unable to believe the woman they had praised for so long could commit such treachery. The younger relatives, usually full of energy and laughter, whispered in shock, glancing back and forth between their parents and me, trying to comprehend what was unfolding. Their innocence collided with the harsh reality of betrayal, and I knew the impact would stay with them for years. My wife sat frozen, staring at me, her perfect act shattered. The smile she had worn for decades cracked, leaving fear and helplessness in its place. The driver stood beside her, caught between panic and guilt, realizing that no lie could undo the evidence I held. Every eye in the room absorbed the truth, and I did not need to speak beyond what was already printed on the pages. The evidence did the work of confrontation far better than any shouting or argument could have. Each message, each recorded call, each carefully preserved photo revealed the hidden betrayal, exposing not just my wife, but also the driver who had abused trust in a place of service. The power of silence combined with proof proved far more devastating than I could have imagined, as I watched her carefully constructed life crumble before the people who mattered most to her. I could feel the shift in the room's energy. Laughter, conversation, and polite gestures were replaced by murmurs, stares, and silent judgment. The family who had once admired her, the people she had sought to impress, now saw the reality of her choices. Every act of betrayal, every secret smile, every hidden meeting came alive in their eyes, and she could no longer hide behind charm or excuses. I had never raised my voice. I had simply let the undeniable truth walk into the room and speak for itself. In that moment, I felt a strange clarity. The years of hurt, anger, and betrayal were distilled into this one act of exposure. Her actions, which had haunted my nights, were now exposed in full daylight. I did not gloat. I did not need to. The silence that followed my revelation carried more weight than any argument, more impact than any confrontation. The proof had spoken, and her life, her carefully maintained image, and the trust she had destroyed were now all laid bare for everyone to see. The silence after my revelation was deafening. Nobody knew what to say. Faces that had been smiling, chatting, and relaxed a few moments ago were now pale, frozen, and filled with shock. I could see my wife's panic growing with every second. She had always believed her family would protect her, that her lies would never reach them, that her charm would keep her safe. But now, the carefully built walls of deceit crumbled. I watched her eyes dart from her parents to the younger relatives, to the driver beside her, searching for any escape. There was none. The room had become a mirror, showing the truth she had tried so hard to hide. Her father's expression twisted in disbelief and rage. The man who had always prided himself on understanding his daughter, protecting her, and trusting her judgment, now found himself staring at a reality he could hardly accept. He clutched his hands to his face, shook his head, and let out a long, frustrated sigh. Shame mingled with anger, and it was clear that he felt betrayed, not by me, but by the woman he had trusted and the man she had chosen to deceive him with. His voice trembled as he tried to formulate words, but none came. Words could not erase what they had just seen, and his silence carried a weight heavier than any punishment I could have delivered. Her mother, usually calm and composed, turned away from the table. Her hands fidgeted with a napkin, her eyes avoiding mine entirely. I could feel her disbelief radiating in waves. She had admired her daughter, boasted about her loyalty, her character, her supposed moral strength. All of that admiration was shattered in moments. She had to come to terms with the fact that the woman she loved and raised had committed acts of betrayal, not just against me, but also against the very values she had instilled in her. The shock was physical, visible in every trembling gesture, every silent step back she took from the table. The younger relatives, those who had grown up seeing my wife as a perfect figure, looked confused, scared, and disappointed. The laughter that had once filled the room had disappeared, replaced by whispered questions, wide eyes, and an uneasy tension. They had always respected her, admired her guidance, and looked up to her as a figure of security and warmth. That illusion was gone. I watched as their perception of family, trust, and loyalty shifted in real time. The betrayal was no longer private. It was public, undeniable, and inescapable. My wife remained frozen, unable to speak. Every attempt to mask fear or concoct excuses failed. She looked to the driver, hoping for support, but he too was paralyzed. I could see the realization in his eyes. No longer could he pretend, no longer could he hope that his presence would shield her from consequence. They had both been exposed, and there was no way to retract the truth. Every whispered insult, every hidden conversation, every act of dishonesty now lay bare before the people who mattered to her most. Some of the relatives started murmuring, expressing anger and disappointment. Words like, "How could you?" and "This is unacceptable," floated across the room. Their whispers spread, infecting the atmosphere with tension and judgment. My wife's reputation, carefully maintained over years of appearances, collapsed in minutes. Every lie she had told, every secret she had kept, had finally caught up with her. Her family's trust was broken, and their perception of her altered forever. I did not speak beyond what I had already revealed. I did not need to. Their reactions spoke louder than any of my words could. Every glare, every shake of the head, every whisper carried the weight of consequence. Justice was being served quietly, without shouting, without confrontation. It was the power of truth laid bare, of betrayal exposed in its full form, that created the most lasting impact. The proof had done its work, and the room reflected its consequences fully. In that moment, I realized the depth of the punishment that silence and evidence could bring. I had not needed to yell, not needed to threaten. The weight of their own actions, reflected in the eyes of those who mattered, was more powerful than anything I could have done verbally. The reactions around me confirmed what I already knew. Betrayal has a cost, and truth has a voice that cannot be silenced. After the room fell into stunned silence and the shock settled across every face, I knew my part was done. I placed the envelope carefully on the table, making sure it was visible to everyone, especially my wife. There was no need for words, no need for further explanation. The evidence had spoken loudly enough on its own. Every text, every photograph, every hidden message was laid bare for all to see. I felt a strange calmness as I looked around the room. The people who had once celebrated her, praised her loyalty, and trusted her implicitly were now staring at her in disbelief. Their eyes carried the weight of judgment, the harsh clarity of truth, and I knew the burden of their realization would be heavier than anything I could impose with shouting or confrontation. I stood slowly, adjusting my posture, walking away from the table with deliberate steps. I did not rush. I did not stumble. I moved with the quiet strength of someone who had suffered, endured, and now reclaimed his own peace. Each step echoed my resolve. Behind me, I could hear the murmurs begin, whispers of disgust, anger, and disappointment spreading like fire across the room. I did not need to hear them. I knew their voices would carry the truth in a way that no words from me ever could. Silence, I realized, was more powerful than any argument. Silence, coupled with evidence, was justice in its purest form. As I walked toward the door, I could see the weight of realization settle fully on my wife. She tried to recover, to salvage some piece of dignity, but it was too late. Every glance from her family was now a judgment, every look from the younger relatives a reminder of their disappointment. The driver who had thought he could escape accountability was equally trapped by the truth. Their own lives, their own choices had led them here. I did not need to curse them. I did not need to yell or scold. The evidence was louder than any insult. The truth left no room for lies or evasion. I passed my wife's parents, who avoided eye contact, still reeling from the betrayal. I did not pause, though I felt the heaviness of their shock. I could sense their hearts breaking, not only for me, but for the illusion of the daughter they had believed to be virtuous. And in that moment, I understood that the impact of my actions was complete. I had given them all the knowledge they needed, and now the consequences would take their course naturally. I had no need to manipulate or push further. Life, when exposed to truth, had its own way of delivering justice. Outside, the evening air felt cool against my face. For the first time in weeks, I could breathe freely. The weight I had carried, the heartbreak, the anger, the betrayal, had not vanished entirely, but it had been transformed. It was no longer a burden. It had become a shield, a calm certainty that I had acted in a way that preserved my dignity and exposed deceit. I had not screamed, I had not struck, and I had not allowed anger to dictate my actions. I had let the truth walk into the room quietly, like a shadow that could not be stopped. The power of that truth had done more than any revenge could have achieved with noise or confrontation. As I walked away from the house, the murmurs inside continued, growing louder with disbelief and judgment. I knew they would talk about it for days, weeks, perhaps months. Every glance she received, every conversation about her would now carry the weight of exposure. I did not need to be present to witness it. The burden of consequence had shifted fully onto those who betrayed me. Their pride, their false sense of security, their carefully constructed image, all of it lay in ruins, and I had nothing left to do but leave and reclaim my peace. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of control. not control over others, but control over myself, over my choices, over my response to betrayal. I had suffered, I had endured, and I had acted with precision. The pain remained, but it no longer ruled me. I had turned suffering into action, deception into truth, and heartbreak into a lesson that those who break trust must inevitably face the consequences. By the time I reached the car, I realized the finality of my actions. I had left behind a room of stunned faces, a wife exposed, a driver shamed, and a family forced to confront betrayal. I did not look back. I did not need to. Their world would now change without me having to lift a finger further. The quiet strength of evidence, the unspoken weight of truth, had done what anger never could. My departure was not just physical. It was symbolic of reclaiming my life, my dignity, and my peace. Now, as an old man looking back, I tell this story not with anger, but with calm. Time has a way of softening the edges of pain, but it never erases the lessons. I remember every detail, the shock in their faces, the silence that followed the revelation, the way my wife froze, her eyes wide with fear and shame. I remember the quiet judgment of her family, the whispers of relatives that carried far more weight than any shouting or yelling ever could. That day, I learned that exposing betrayal with patience and precision could achieve more than any fight fueled by rage ever would. I had been betrayed by someone I trusted deeply, by the woman I loved and the man I relied on. Yet, I refused to let them control the narrative. I refused to allow anger to dictate my actions. Instead, I chose clarity, evidence, and timing. I let the truth speak for itself. I think often about why this approach mattered. In my life, I had always believed that honor, dignity, and patience carried their own power. When my heart was broken, I had two choices: to scream and fight in vain, or to act in a way that left no room for doubt or denial. I chose the latter. Every message I had saved, every call I had recorded, every photograph I had collected was a tool. Each piece of evidence carried weight beyond my own feelings. It represented undeniable truth. By showing it at the right moment, I shifted the balance. I did not need to shout or berate. The evidence did the work. My wife, the driver, and even the family around them could no longer pretend the betrayal did not happen. The truth had cut through all pretense, and it was more powerful than any anger could ever be. As I reflect, I realize that betrayal teaches the hardest lessons. It forces a person to examine their own values, their own trust, and the strength of their character. I was forced to confront the fact that someone I loved could deceive me so completely, that someone who worked for me and whom I treated fairly could break boundaries without remorse. The sting was sharp, but the lesson it carried was invaluable. I learned that silence and patience could wield power greater than any confrontation. I learned that exposing the truth carefully, without emotion clouding judgment, could deliver justice more lasting than any immediate revenge. I learned that dignity is preserved when actions are deliberate, precise, and measured. Looking back, I feel no bitterness. I do not regret the years I spent giving my heart and trust, even if it was returned with betrayal. Those years shaped who I am. They taught me patience, discernment, and the value of observing before acting. I only regret that deception had crept so close to my life, but that regret is tempered by the satisfaction of having acted wisely. The shame my wife and her accomplice faced was deserved, and it was not inflicted recklessly. It was the natural consequence of choices made without honor or loyalty. Their humiliation was not my triumph. It was simply the exposure of truth that I could no longer allow to remain hidden. Now I share this story calmly, hoping it teaches those who hear it something about patience, courage, and dignity. Betrayal will hurt. There is no avoiding that. But how you respond can either make you a victim or restore your strength. I chose the latter. I chose silence paired with proof, patience paired with action, and dignity over anger. That day, I did not simply expose my wife's deception. I reclaimed my life, my peace, and my own sense of self-worth. And as I close my eyes and remember, I realize this. The greatest victory over betrayal is not in revenge alone, but in acting with foresight, integrity, and clarity. Betrayal may strike unexpectedly, but it cannot break someone who responds with truth and patience. The people who hurt me may have lost face, they may have lost trust, and they may have lost the respect of those around them. But I gained something far greater. I gained peace. I gained dignity. I gained the knowledge that no matter how deep the wound, one can rise above with wisdom, calm, and an unwavering sense of justice. Final thought. Betrayal can sting, but truth and dignity always endure. I let the world see their deception, and in doing so, I freed myself from the shadow they cast.